The RSI stuff is always a little bit tricky because it's got Chris's name attached to it, right? There's always just a little extra pressure. Basically, taking what we've done previously and pushing it again, and just breathing new life into it, and finding ways that we can keep the RSI style interesting, but also keep it fresh for the players.
We have a lot of fighters in Star Citizen, and they cover a huge plethora of combat styles. One area that we have only a few ships filling is this two-person heavy escort fighter role. So RSI is typically, you think of it as a more civilian or utilitarian manufacturer, but they do actually dabble their hands in military and sort of aggressive fighting ships. You have the Bengal, which is probably the pinnacle of it. You have the Polaris, and now you have the Scorpius. So when we were designing the Scorpius, we obviously had that classic silhouette.
We're always looking at silhouettes, and there was a funny stage where kind of thought that maybe we were going a bit safe in some areas. So I did a couple of sort of, I would call them wacky, but there was sort of slightly more sort of modified RSI styling. Basically, there were hints of it in there, but it's really starting to push towards the edges of like entering into a new generation of RSI. So we had about 20 maybe more, and then it's just a process of refinement, narrowing it down. What do I like? What does Chris like? And ultimately we ended up on the one that had sort of an X formation. It's common within sci-fi, but we've yet to do it in the Star Citizen universe. I was just like, let's just own this. This is where we've arrived. Looks really cool. Let's just go for it.
The RSI Scorpius is a two-player ship. It has a pilot and a remote turret gunner. They both access the ship via a side ladder, much like some of our other ships. And what makes this ship different to our other fighters in this area is that second player has access to a remote turret that can also change states and sort of track round to the underside of the ship. So if you are in a scenario where you have an attacker above or below you and your pilot cannot alter course for whatever reason, you yourself are able to go move the turret to account for that.
And I think for the fans, it's gonna make a more interesting sort of experience for them. In different situations, you're going to be able to make that call. Where do you want the turret, on the top or the bottom? It does have its limitations. It's not like a magic gun that gives you all-round cover over everything, which I kind of like. I like it when our systems do have some limitations and they're not all just like all singing, all dancing, can do everything.
A really nice feature of this turret, unlike some of our other turrets in the game, is no matter what state it is in, you are in a consistent viewpoint. So when you get to that transition point where it goes from the top of that ship to the bottom, your view stays the same way up. It nicely gimbals around, so you don't have this awkward bit where you might be attacking someone, you want to change positions, and halfway through your view flips 180 degrees, you get disorientated. That doesn't happen. It keeps it the right way up the entire time. So the pilot has access to 4 size 3 mounts on the wingtips. These come with size 2 gimbaled weapons by default, so you have a lot of forward-facing firepower there. And then you also have 2 missile racks built into the hull, and these come with 4 size 2 missiles by default on each side. So again, it's all about the forward-facing firepower for the pilot, so they can concentrate on just flying and attacking things in their frontal arc.
Of course, I'm biased. I think totally the ship fits. I think as we develop these ships over the years, it's always how to push them further, keep players interested, how to keep visual engagement, I guess. It's always a challenge, how to improve and push, almost like a virtual design house, isn't it? So that's always the challenge, but also keep the DNA. You want people who are fans of RSI to feel like, yeah, this is this is hitting the beats yet, but it's also feeling fresh. And I think with, normally we don't have wings on RSI ships. Often it's sort of nacelles and movable parts like that. So this is kind of a hybrid. So it is pushing into new territory.
So the Scorpius adds an additional multi-crew ship to the game, and one that really takes the fight to other players. I think it's going to be quite popular in fleet battles. You always need these supporting ships, and we always try and make getting more people in a ship beneficial than having multiple ships. And as we develop and improve upon the multi-crew aspect, I really think that ships like the Scorpius are just going to get stronger and stronger and stronger.
The Scorpius is the latest offering from the RSI Applied Innovations group on Killian, and you can learn even more about it tomorrow when it makes its full debut on day 1 of Invictus Launch Week 2951. But up next, it's time for another environmentally themed sprint report. Away we go. Let's start things off by catching up with the current progress on hospitals. In this case, Brentworth in New Babbage, which is currently in final art phase. Now, if you've been following along all quarter, you can see things really starting to come together now, as most of these recent sprints have been full of polish passes on things like more signage coming through, those gurneys and props we saw earlier being placed about, finalization of floor details like the cut-in glass and botanicals underneath, the architecture that's really starting to come through now, floor decals, signage above the doors, and more. I'm glad it looks so good, because with the way I play, I've no doubt hospitals will be my most visited locations. You'll soon be number 2, prison. Moving on to some technical advancements, members of the Planet Tech team are currently in a series of R&D sprints exploring an improved canyon experience for future locations. What you're seeing here isn't an actual planet that's being made for the game, but one of many prototype zoos we've discussed on ISCs in the past. Now, prototype asset zoos like this are a great way to test many different options at once, and the main purpose here is to develop a better way to mitigate the stretching and artifacting that currently occurs when you stretch one of our height maps too high or too steeply. Currently in game, many of our canyon walls are popcorned with smaller rocks to help disguise this and provide a better read overall. But these new tests are designed to add geometry breakup on the surfaces themselves to prevent unsightly stretch marks. Now, these experiments are the next step in creating more dynamic surfaces for Star Citizen's planets and moons, and will only continue to get better looking and more realistic as the team continues their efforts. Now, it's been a month since we last looked in on the continuing work building our upcoming colonialism homesteads. I know, I couldn't believe it either. So let's check in with some of the prop plants currently in development. Now, the team is looking not just for a variety of different shapes and silhouettes, but also the potential for indoor personal harvestables that players can pick, and the variations of all of these at different stages of life and death. So, great. Another chance to disappoint my mother by being unable to keep houseplants alive both in the real world and now virtually. As for the homesteads themselves, they're working their way through Greybox now, so let's take a look inside at this internal review that was done just a couple weeks ago. And outside, whoa! Okay, we're going to see more of that planet starting next quarter. As for this quarter, let's jump into the most anticipated location making its way into the Star Citizen universe in the upcoming Alpha 3.14. The VFX team recently completed a sprint bringing the nighttime emissive particles that were previously developed for the nightclub in Wally's Bar and expanding on it for Orison At Night. Now this looks pretty good, But when this gets layered in with the finished lighting pass and the nighttime gas clouds in the background, I think it's safe to say we're going to be in for something truly special when both Crusader and Orison arrive in the upcoming Alpha 3.14. So what did we learn this week? Well, we learned that RSI is looking to break out of its shell and stretch its proverbial and literal wings in new and exciting directions. That Planet Tech continues to innovate and improve in their desire to make each new planet better than the last. And that Orison is going to set a brand new benchmark for landing zones when it arrives at the end of this quarter. Now, don't forget that Invictus Launch Week officially begins tomorrow, where you can journey through a jumbo javelin, breathe in a behemoth Bengal, and fly nearly every fighter for free. You could say I'm always about abusing alliteration. For Inside Star Citizen, I'm Jared Huckabee. We'll see you all next week.